What if a single sword could decide the fate of entire worlds? Imagine holding a blade that whispers secrets only you can hear. Not just a weapon, but a force that shapes destiny itself. Legendary swords in fantasy are never just forged from steel. They are forged from myths, sacrifices, and forgotten ancient powers. Every mark on their blade carries a story waiting silently. But have you ever wondered why these swords matter so much? Why does a simple object hold such overwhelming narrative importance? Because these swords represent far more than combat or survival. They symbolize power, legacy, and the burden of responsibility. In epic fantasy, swords often choose their wielders, not the opposite, and that single idea changes everything about their significance. Suddenly, the weapon becomes a character with its own will. It is no longer controlled, but rather demands to be understood. Heroes are not always worthy simply because they hold it. Sometimes, the sword tests them in ways unimaginable and cruel, and sometimes it rejects them entirely without explanation. This mysterious connection creates a deeper emotional engagement instantly. Because now, the story is not just about battles anymore. It becomes about identity, destiny, and inner transformation. Think about a hero discovering a legendary sword unexpectedly. That moment is never calm, simple, or purely triumphant. It is filled with doubt, fear, and overwhelming responsibility. Because such power always comes with hidden consequences. And those consequences often shape the hero's entire journey forward. These swords are often tied to ancient prophecies or forgotten legends, stories passed down through generations, distorted yet deeply powerful. They carry expectations that can either elevate or destroy individuals, because living up to a legend is never as easy. And failing that expectation can lead to devastating outcomes. This tension is what makes legendary swords so compelling. They are not just tools, but symbols of impossible expectations. And every character who wields them must face that reality. Some embrace it, while others crumble under its weight. This internal struggle becomes just as important as external conflict. Because the greatest battles are often fought within the mind, the sword simply becomes a reflection of that inner war. Its power amplifies what already exists inside the wielder. Courage becomes legendary, but fear becomes equally destructive. This duality adds depth to every interaction involving the blade. You start questioning whether the sword is truly a blessing, or if it is actually a beautifully disguised curse. Many stories blur this line intentionally to create suspense, because uncertainty keeps you emotionally invested in the narrative. You want to know whether the hero will overcome the burden or become consumed by the very power they sought. This unpredictability is what makes legendary swords unforgettable elements. They hold the potential for both salvation and destruction simultaneously. And that balance is never stable for long periods. Power always demands a price, especially in fantasy worlds. Sometimes that price is physical, but often deeply emotional. The sword may grant strength, but take away something essential: trust, humanity, or even the wielder's sense of self. These sacrifices add emotional weight to every decision made, because every swing of the blade carries unseen consequences. And every victory may come with hidden losses attached. This transforms action scenes into moments of deeper significance. You are not just watching combat, but witnessing transformation. Transformation that may lead to greatness or irreversible downfall. And that uncertainty keeps you constantly engaged and curious. But there is something even more intriguing about these swords. Something that goes beyond their power or mysterious origins. It is how they influence entire worlds, not just individuals. Kingdoms rise and fall based on who wields them. Wars are fought not for land, but for possession. Alliances are formed or broken because of their existence. This elevates the sword from object to central narrative force. It becomes a catalyst for events far beyond imagination. And that is where things start becoming even more complex. Because the story is not just about the sword itself. It is about the people who desire it relentlessly and what they are willing to sacrifice to obtain it. This desire sets the stage for everything that follows next, because power attracts ambition, and ambition often leads to conflict. And that is exactly where our journey continues deeper. Now let us step deeper into how these worlds actually function. Imagine a young noble witnessing their kingdom quietly falling apart, not through invasion, but through subtle political maneuvering and betrayal. Advisors whisper into ears, shaping decisions that affect entire nations. Each conversation becomes a move in an invisible strategic game. The noble begins noticing patterns others fail to recognize. Promises are made publicly yet broken silently behind closed doors. Leaders smile during meetings while secretly planning each other's downfall. This is where politics becomes more dangerous than open warfare, because enemies are no longer easily identifiable on the battlefield. They sit beside you, sharing meals and exchanging polite words. Epic fantasy excels at portraying this unsettling duality of relationships. Trust becomes fragile, constantly threatened by ambition and survival instincts. And slowly, the noble starts adapting to this harsh reality. They learn that honesty can be a dangerous weakness, and silence can sometimes be the most powerful statement. Meanwhile, outside palace walls, tensions begin rising among common people. Rumors spread faster than truth, shaping public perception unpredictably. Fear becomes a tool used by those seeking greater control. The population becomes divided unknowingly, serving different political agendas. This division often leads to inevitable conflict and violent uprisings. War suddenly erupts, appearing spontaneous but carefully orchestrated beforehand. Soldiers march believing they fight for justice and honor, yet many are unaware of the true reasons behind conflict. This disconnect creates a tragic layer within fantasy storytelling, because the people fighting rarely understand the full picture, and those in power rarely face the consequences directly. You start to see how narratives control both war and politics. Whoever controls a story often controls the outcome entirely. Epic fantasy highlights this through propaganda and selective truth-telling. Characters manipulate information to maintain influence over others strategically. And sometimes, lies become accepted truths over time. This mirrors how real societies often function in subtle ways. But fantasy amplifies these elements to make them impossible to ignore. It exaggerates reality to reveal deeper truths about human behavior. The noble we imagined now faces an impossible decision. Should they remain honorable or adapt to survive politically? This moral dilemma becomes central to many epic narratives, because survival often demands compromise, sometimes at great personal cost. The noble chooses strategy over innocence, and everything changes. They begin playing the same game they once despised deeply, forming alliances, breaking promises, and manipulating outcomes carefully. Each decision pushes them further from who they once were, and yet it brings them closer to achieving their goals. This transformation is both powerful and deeply unsettling to witness, because it forces you to reflect on your own boundaries. How far would you go to protect what matters most? Would you sacrifice your values for the greater good? Or would you hold on to integrity and risk losing everything? Epic fantasy thrives on these uncomfortable, thought-provoking questions. It places characters in situations where no choice feels entirely right. And that is what keeps audiences emotionally invested throughout. Because you are not just watching decisions unfold passively. You are mentally participating in those decisions alongside characters. This engagement creates a deeper connection to the narrative. The noble eventually gains power but loses something equally important: their innocence, their trust, and perhaps their sense of self. Victory in politics often comes with invisible, lasting consequences, and war only amplifies those consequences further and faster. Entire kingdoms may be saved, yet individuals remain permanently changed. This contrast is what makes epic fantasy emotionally impactful. It shows that winning does not always feel like triumph. Sometimes, victory carries a weight heavier than defeat itself. And that realization shifts how you view every conflict. You begin to question whether any side truly wins completely, or if everyone loses something essential along the way. This growing tension prepares you for a deeper revelation, because everything you have seen so far is only surface level. There is a hidden layer most viewers never fully notice, a truth that changes how you interpret everything entirely. It challenges the very foundation of war and politics, and forces you to rethink what power truly represents. This is where the narrative takes an unexpected turn, and everything begins to look completely different than before, because the real story was never about war at all. Here's the twist that changes everything you thought you understood. War in epic fantasy is rarely the ultimate objective. Instead, it is often a tool used by those in power. A distraction designed to hide deeper political intentions unfolding silently. While armies clash, real decisions are made far from battlefields. Power shifts quietly through agreements, betrayals, and calculated compromises. The chaos of war creates opportunities that peace never allows. Leaders exploit this chaos to reshape entire systems unnoticed. Suddenly, war appears less like conflict and more like strategy. This realization forces you to rethink every battle you've witnessed. What if the true winners never fought on the front lines? What if victory was decided long before swords ever clashed? Epic fantasy subtly reveals this through hidden story layers. Characters who avoid battles often gain the most influence. While heroes fight bravely, strategists quietly control the outcome. This contrast highlights the difference between action and control, and it challenges traditional ideas of heroism and bravery. Because sometimes the most powerful move is doing nothing visible, or manipulating events so others act exactly as intended. This deeper insight transforms how you view political narratives. Power is not about strength, but about influence and perception. Those who control perception can shape reality itself, and those who shape reality rarely reveal their true intentions. This creates a world where truth becomes increasingly difficult to define. Every character operates within layers of hidden motivations, and every decision carries consequences far beyond immediate outcomes. You begin to see patterns repeating across different stories, different worlds, different characters, yet identical power structures. This universality is what makes epic fantasy so compelling. It reflects something fundamental about human systems and behavior. War becomes a cycle rather than a singular event. Politics becomes a constant force shaping that cycle continuously. And individuals become both participants and victims within this system. This perspective shift changes how you engage with stories. You stop focusing only on what happens externally and start analyzing why events unfold the way they do. This deeper understanding makes every narrative more meaningful because you are no longer just consuming entertainment passively. You are interpreting complex systems and hidden messages actively. And this awareness extends beyond fiction into real life. You begin noticing similar patterns in everyday situations, how narratives are shaped, how power is maintained subtly, and how conflict is sometimes used to influence perception. This is the true brilliance of epic fantasy storytelling. It teaches without directly instructing or preaching lessons. It reveals truth through metaphor, symbolism, and emotional engagement. And it leaves you with questions rather than answers, because questions drive curiosity, and curiosity drives deeper understanding. So what does this mean for you moving forward? It means you see stories differently than before now. You question motives, analyze decisions, and look beyond surface narratives. You recognize that power is rarely as simple as it appears, and that conflict often serves purposes beyond what is visible. This awareness gives you a new perspective on storytelling entirely. But more importantly, it changes how you see the world. Because stories are reflections, not just creations of imagination. They mirror truths we sometimes struggle to acknowledge directly, and they allow us to explore those truths safely. Now, here's where everything comes together powerfully. If you understand how fantasy depicts war and politics, you understand how narratives shape perception and influence decisions. And once you understand that, you gain a unique advantage: the ability to think critically about information presented to you, the ability to question, reflect, and form independent conclusions. This is where entertainment transforms into something far more valuable. It becomes a tool for awareness and personal growth. So the next time you watch or read epic fantasy, don't just follow the story at surface level. Look deeper, question everything, and analyze hidden motivations carefully. Because the real story is always beneath what you see, and once you start noticing it, you cannot unsee it. That is the true power of epic fantasy storytelling. It changes not just how you watch, but how you think. And that shift stays with you long after the story ends. Now the question is, what will you do with it?